Hey everybody, so here we're back again with this beige computer that I featured in a recent video, well, two recent videos. First video is me doing an overview of this thing, and the second video is me cleaning out the dust that was in this thing because it was quite filthy. So in my previous overview video I had to cut it pretty short because I was shooting the video right before sunset, and I wanted to get this machine outside so that way I could clean it out with the air compressor before the sun went down completely. So I did make the last video pretty short, but this video we'll try to cover a little more. And this time we're actually going to test this machine, see if it even works. So this computer was built around 2006 apparently, according to the date on the front. Well, they wrote 2006 on the front of the case. I'm not a fan of I'm not really a fan of the fact that they freaking use a Sharpie to write the drive letters and stuff all over the case, because now I have to try to clean that mess off of this thing. Wonderful. It gets better. Around back, there's more of it on the I/O shield plate. Okay, everybody, so here's a closer look inside the system. Now, one thing that stands out right away is this is not 2006 era hardware in this machine. Now, the front drives, they probably might be from 06, I don't know. You could still buy a new floppy drive back in 2006, for example. However, I know for sure this motherboard is definitely older than this case. This is an Intel socket 423 motherboard. So this is 2000 or 2001 era hardware. So the Pentium 4 processor, when it came out back then, it originally came out on the socket 423 design, and then later on they moved up to socket 478, which was much more common. That was like 02 to 04, and then around 05 they went to socket 775, which was also what was used by the Pentium D, the Core 2 Duo, the Core 2 Quad, etc. So this motherboard, I want to say it appears it is from a Gateway computer. What I think happened was, back in the day, the person that owned this machine, they probably bought a brand new Gateway PC back in 2001, give or take. And at some point around, let's say 05, 06, the original power supply in that system must have failed. And I've worked on these old Gateways before, and some of them were small form factor systems with weird power supplies, and instead of replacing the power supply with another one just like it, again, non-standard, not like that unit up there, what they did is they just went out and purchased a standard micro ATX mini tower case and purchased a regular ATX power supply, all the good stuff, and just rebuilt the system. I did a similar thing back several years ago. I think I have a video up on the channel actually. What I did is I recased an old Gateway system from its proprietary mini case design into an eMachines tower, similar size to this micro ATX design system. It uses a regular power supply, so that was really straightforward, easy to do, saved the customer a whole lot of money versus tracking down a used replacement, or if I'm lucky, new replacement unit for the original computer. And also, being in a larger case like this, everything runs cooler because, let's face it, the original Gateway tower was really tiny. So that being said, if you look there, we have a whole bunch of failed capacitors right next to the CPU heatsink. So motherboards from this time, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, they were very notorious for capacitors failing, because electrolytic capacitors back then, even now still, there's a bunch of junk ones out there. But back then, even reputable brands were suffering due to a flawed electrolyte formula that was getting passed around between manufacturer and manufacturer, and there was a whole lot of issues with caps back then. Motherboards lasted only a few years in some cases because of capacitors failing. I question whether this motherboard will even work with the caps the way it is right now. It would definitely need a recap if I was to put this system back into service somehow. But anyways, we have DDR memory in this system, probably PC 2100 or something like that. Now these older Pentium 4 or Celeron based systems on socket 423, you would typically find them with either DDR SD-RAM or old-fashioned SD-RAM, or in some cases RD-RAM. It really depends. It was kind of an interesting time back then. But this one again has DDR, so much more common, easy to find, have plenty of it. Not sure how much we have just yet, to take a look at that, but we have 2 hard drives in this system. I'm not sure if they were set up in RAID or if they were set up as something else. But I'm willing to question if maybe they were set up in a software-based RAID, because very doubtful this motherboard supports RAID. Again, I do want to say that is a Gateway OEM board. We'll find out shortly when we go to attempt to start this thing, if it posts. So, not only does the motherboard have failed capacitors, this power supply also has some failed caps too. This power supply was probably not the original unit to this case. I'm willing to bet that they probably bought this case and it came with a cheap junk power supply. That was the thing they did back then. Case manufacturers would bundle in a cheap garbage power supply for like 10 or 20 bucks, and let me tell you, those power supplies, they were junk. The best thing you could do is just pull them right out and put in a decent unit, or if you're very tech savvy and good with electronics, in some cases you could improve them a little bit, but it still wouldn't be as good as a decent, like, reputable unit. So this power supply has TPO caps in it, and I see FCON in there too, so it's going to need a full recap. Question if it even works, we'll find out shortly. On the back we have your typical ports from the early 2000s. Got a broken USB port right there, so when they installed this motherboard they mistakenly did not have this metal tongue or whatever go on top of these ports. Instead it went right into it, and actually it might have caused a short. But the plastic is gone out of that, so that USB port is definitely a goner. We got 2 more USB ports up there. For some unknown reason they labeled them. Well, they labeled them all actually. Why? Why labeled USB ports? But yeah, we got onboard video. You got a printer port there, COM port there. So yeah, very typical from the time. This motherboard apparently does not have onboard LAN. So they got an Ethernet card installed there and a fax phone there. Now what's weird, let me turn this around. It looks like there is in fact a Ethernet controller on this board. I don't know for sure. Like I said, I'd have to pull the board out to know for sure. My plan for this thing is probably to pull the motherboard out, the motherboard and the rest of the stuff out, and I might relocate this stuff into maybe an old A-Machines tower or something. Who knows? Alright, so let's go ahead and attempt to start this thing. Alright, so I got this thing plugged up. I have not switched on power just yet on the back of the power supply. I do want to mention that if this thing does start up, that I'm not going to show much within Windows to protect the privacy of the previous owners of this machine, because one thing I'm going to be doing with it is I'm going to be wiping the files off of it, all that good stuff. But yeah, we'll see if this thing starts. Alright, power is on to the... Oh! Y'all see that? Okay, power down. We might have a short circuit. These caps might actually be dead shorted. Yep. Okay, either power supply or motherboard. I'm going to put a different power supply and see what it does. Okay, so I swapped in another power supply. This unit has been fully recapped recently, minus the 2 big caps in the primary. So we'll see if it'll start now. I still have my doubts. I'm thinking we might have a short in the motherboard, probably from failed capacitors. Let's see what it does. Hopefully no magic smoke. Hopefully it starts. We'll see. Yep, you see how it immediately tried to start, and the reason why I selected this particular unit is because it has the power good indication in the back. You can see the light is out. We have 5-volt standby indicating the power supply 5-volt standby rail is active. We have a dead short in this system. Probably right in here. Probably these caps might be shorted. We might even have a shorted MOSFET over here somewhere. Not good, unfortunately. Okay, so I've disconnected the power connection from the CPU VRM on the motherboard. What this does is takes in 12 volts from the power supply and it steps it down to the roughly 1.7 volts, whatever this processor uses. It's probably a Willamette processor core, so it probably runs on 1.7 volts. These caps here, chances are likely there is a short circuit either in the caps themselves or, I hope not, but possibly also in the MOSFETs over here. Because what can happen, these caps can short out and they can also take out the MOSFETs with them. So what I may end up doing if this thing powers up without this connected is we will end up recapping this motherboard right here, but it won't be in this video. But with this disconnected, let's see what happens. I'm going to plug in power to the power supply and let's see if it comes on. And you can see it does. Got a noisy fan back here. But yeah, this thing is coming up now, but of course it will not post because... turn that off. Alright, it will not post, of course, because the processor is not receiving power. But that does tell us that our short is definitely in this area. So, like I say, what I may try doing is I may recap this board and see if this fingers crossed that maybe recapping the board will remove a short circuit from this area. Remains to be seen, but who knows. One other thing I want to talk about is, I mentioned in the prior video that the previous owner must have been tech savvy, but I'm seeing stuff in here I don't much like. For example, right there, missing screw. Got a thumb screw down here, for example. Another thing is, although this case physically has a floppy disk drive in it, why didn't they use a floppy drive? The motherboard has a floppy drive controller right there. Why didn't they use it? It makes me wonder if they bought this case with the drives in it, not the hard drives, but the 5¼ inch front drives and the 3½ inch front drive. Once they bought this case with that in it, and they just put this motherboard in it from a previous system, which I mentioned earlier, probably had a failed power supply. Who knows? Don't really know with this thing. But like I say, I will recap. Once I get to it, I will try recapping this board, see if that gets up and running, and we'll see if we can get this thing to come back up. So anyways, we're going to leave it here for now on this little project. So hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.